Hello, wanderers of the night. Come closer to the hearth. Let me tell you about a world where monsters are real, where magic flows like blood through ancient veins, and where every shadow might conceal a creature from your darkest nightmares. Picture yourself on a rain-soaked road, mud clinging to your boots, when you see a notice board in some forgotten village. The parchment is weathered, the ink smudged by moisture, but the message is clear. A contract for a witcher. Something stalks these lands, something that defies the natural order. Tonight, we journey through the folklore and legends of the continent. The world we explore tonight is one shaped by catastrophe, populated by beings that should not exist, governed by prophecies written in blood and starlight. This is a world where a wandering monster hunter carries two swords on his back, one for men and one for beasts, though both are for monsters. We will delve into the stories whispered in taverns when the ale flows freely, the legends carved into ancient elven stones, the secrets that even witches fear to speak aloud. From the conjunction that shattered reality itself to the prophecies that may end it, from the smallest drowner lurking in a bog to dragons that could darken the sky, we will explore them all. So settle in, let the fire's warmth embrace you, and prepare yourself for a journey into a world where folktales are survival guides and monsters are more than metaphors. 1,500 years before the tales of Geralt of Rivia, before witches walked the roads and sorceresses bent reality to their will, the world was different. The continent belonged to the elder races, the elves with their immortal grace, the dwarves with their mountain kingdoms, the gnomes with their ingenious contraptions. Magic existed, yes, but it was rare and refined, possessed primarily by a few gifted elves and the enigmatic unicorns who shepherded the natural order. Humans did not exist here. Vampires did not hunt these forests. Ghouls did not feast in graveyards. The world was ordered, comprehensible, bound by laws that made sense. Then came the cataclysm. Imagine the fabric of reality itself tearing like old parchment. Not in one place, not in one world, but across the entire multiverse simultaneously. Scholars would later call it the conjunction of the spheres, a name that sounds almost clinical, almost manageable, but there was nothing manageable about it. Picture it like ships on a cosmic sea, each vessel carrying its own cargo, its own crew, sailing separate courses through the void. For millennia, these ships passed at safe distances, visible only as distant points of light in an endless dark. But then a storm rose, a tempest beyond imagining, and the ships were hurled toward one another, colliding in a catastrophic convergence. When worlds collide, what happens? Pieces break off. Passengers are flung from one vessel to another. The cargo spills across decks where it was never meant to be. The conjunction was precisely this, a cosmic shipwreck that stranded countless beings in dimensions not their own, in worlds that had no place prepared for them. The elves who witnessed this disaster recorded what they saw. The sky itself seemed to tear open, revealing glimpses of other places, other realms. Through these rifts poured creatures beyond classification. Some were merely strange, like the Kikimor with their insectoid bodies and spider-like movements. Others were abominations, things that should never have drawn breath in any sane world. Ghouls that feasted on corpses, gravers that hunted in packs, vampires of various breeds, each more terrible than the last. These were post-conjunction beings, creatures without an ecological niche in this world, predators and parasites that did not fit into the natural order because they were never meant to be here. But the conjunction brought more than monsters. It brought humans. According to elven accounts, and the elves have no reason to lie about this particular shame, humanity arrived on the continent as refugees from a dying world. Their own realm had been destroyed, whether by war or magic or simple catastrophic mismanagement of their resources, the records do not say. They came through the rifts during the conjunction, scattered and desperate, finding themselves in a world that already had its own civilizations, its own history, its own rightful inhabitants. The elves remember when humans were few and frightened, huddling in small bands, barely able to survive in a land where they were not the apex predators. The elves could have helped them. They could have driven them away. Instead, they made the fatal mistake of underestimating these short-lived, adaptable creatures. Within a few generations, humans had multiplied beyond belief. Within a few centuries, they had learned to wield the new magic that had emerged from the conjunction. Within a millennium, they had conquered the continent. Because the conjunction did not just bring creatures and refugees, it brought magic itself, or at least a new form of it. Before the cataclysm, magic was a subtle thing, an art practiced by a talented few, mostly elves, whose long lives gave them time to master its intricacies. The magic that came through the rifts was different, raw, chaotic, powerful beyond measure. Scholars call it chaos, and the name is apt. This was not the gentle shaping of natural forces, but the ability to tear reality apart and remake it according to one's will. Humans, it turned out, had an unexpected aptitude for this new magic. Perhaps their shorter lives made them more reckless. Perhaps their desperation made them willing to take risks that more cautious races would avoid. Perhaps it was simply that they had nothing to lose and everything to gain. Whatever the reason, human mages emerged within a generation of the conjunction, wielders of power that made even elven sages pause in concern. The conjunction lasted for an unknown duration, days, weeks. The accounts vary. What is certain is that when the rifts finally closed, when the spheres separated once more and sailed their own courses through the cosmic sea, the damage was done. The world had been fundamentally altered. Monsters prowled lands that had known only natural predators. Magic saturated the very air, seeping into everything, changing things in ways both subtle and profound. And humanity had gained a foothold from which they would never be dislodged. The elves tried to coexist with the newcomers at first. Treaties were signed. Borders were established. The Ensider, as the elves of the continent call themselves, believed they could maintain their civilization while allowing humans to carve out a space for themselves in the less desirable regions. This hope was naive. Humans bred like rabbits compared to elves, whose fertility was mysteriously low. Human ambition knew no bounds. Human wars spilled across borders that elves considered sacred. The great elven cities fell one by one, not always to direct conquest, sometimes to simple attrition, as human settlements grew and elven populations dwindled. The weirwoods, the elven forests, were cleared for farmland. The ancient places of power were desecrated or claimed by human mages. Within a few hundred years of the conjunction, elves were no longer the masters of the continent, but a dwindling minority, pushed to the margins, their great works crumbling, their knowledge fading. This is the bitter irony of the conjunction. The elves, who had lived on the continent for millennia before humanity arrived, ended up being displaced by the very refugees they might have shown mercy to. The dwarves, pragmatic and adaptable, managed better. carving out their mountain kingdoms and establishing themselves as invaluable craftsmen and merchants. But even they lost their independence over time, their holds becoming tributaries to human kingdoms. The conjunction brought one more gift, though gift is perhaps too kind a word. It brought knowledge of how to manipulate biology itself through magic. This knowledge would eventually lead to the creation of witches, but that is a tale that deserves its own telling. For now, understand that the conjunction of the spheres was the single most important event in the history of the continent. Everything that came after, every monster hunted, every war fought, every prophecy spoken, all of it traces back to that moment when worlds collided and nothing was ever the same again. And there are those who whisper that it could happen again, that the spheres might one day align once more, that new rifts might open, bringing fresh horrors from dimensions better left untouched. Some believe there are individuals with the power to control such events, to open gates between worlds at will. If such people exist, if such power is real, then the conjunction's legacy is not merely historical, but prophetic. The past may yet become prologue to an even greater cataclysm. But that is a fear for another night. For now, let us move forward in our chronicle to the aftermath of the conjunction, when humanity faced a world suddenly filled with monsters and decided that monsters could be fought, monsters could be killed, and some men could be made into weapons against the darkness. In the years following the conjunction of the spheres, humanity found itself in a desperate struggle for survival. The monsters that had poured through the rifts did not simply disappear when the cataclysm ended. They bred, they adapted, they thrived. A drowner lurking in a pond could drag down a woman gathering water. A necker infestation could wipe out an entire village's food supply overnight. A griffin could terrorize a region for years, picking off travelers and livestock with impunity. Regular soldiers, no matter how brave or skilled, often proved inadequate against creatures that could regenerate from wounds, that moved with supernatural speed, that possessed venoms or curses or sheer physical power beyond mortal measure. Magic could fight monsters, of course. A skilled sorcerer could burn a nest of necrophages to ash or blast a rampaging fiend into oblivion. But mages were rare, expensive, and most importantly, political. They served kings and councils, engaged in their own schemes and conspiracies. They had little interest in dealing with the everyday monsters that plagued common folk. A peasant farmer, whose well had been fouled by a drowner, could never afford to hire a mage. Even a minor nobleman might hesitate to call upon magical assistance for what seemed like a local problem. This was the world that gave birth to witches. The specifics of who first conceived the idea are lost to time, wrapped in legend and deliberate obscurity. What is known is that several centuries after the conjunction, human mages began experimenting with ways to create monster hunters who did not require years of magical training, who could be produced in numbers sufficient to actually make a difference, and who would be effective enough to tackle threats that regular soldiers could not. The solution they devised was both ingenious and monstrous. They would take young children, usually boys between the ages of 7 and 10, and subject them to a series of mutations that would transform them into something more than human. Not quite monsters themselves, but no longer fully human either. These enhanced warriors would have the strength, speed, and resilience to face down creatures that would tear apart ordinary men. They would be trained from childhood in the arts of combat and monster lore. They would be professionals, hunters who would work for coin, beholden to no king or country, serving any who could pay their fee. The process of creating a witcher begins with the brutal ritual known as the Trial of the Grasses. The name comes from the specially prepared herbs and alchemicals, compounds that are administered to the candidates. These substances are toxic, deliberately so. They break down the child's body at a cellular level, allowing the mages to introduce mutagens, genetic material harvested from various monsters and magical creatures. The mutagens rewrite the child's very biology, granting enhanced senses, increased strength and reflexes, rapid healing, and most crucially, resistance to toxins and diseases. The trial kills more children than it saves. Depending on which records you consult, the survival rate ranges from 30 to 40% at best. Those who survive the initial transformation then face a second ordeal. Further mutations and alchemical treatments designed to refine and enhance their new abilities. Some children survive the first trial but die in the second. Others make it through both only to be left permanently damaged, their minds shattered or their bodies twisted into forms that cannot sustain life for long. Those who survive become witches. Their eyes develop cat-like pupils that can dilate to see in near total darkness. Their hair often turns white or pale during the mutations, a mark that sets them apart. Their hearing becomes acute enough to detect a heartbeat from across a room. They can survive wounds that would kill a normal human, their mutated bodies closing cuts and mending broken bones with supernatural speed. They are sterile, a side effect of the mutations that guarantees witches will never have families of their own. But perhaps the most valuable gift, and the most dangerous, is their tolerance for toxins. A witcher can consume alchemical concoctions called potions that would poison an ordinary human within seconds. These potions provide temporary enhancements, cat-like vision that can pierce absolute darkness, supernatural strength that lets them match a monster's power, reflexes so quick that arrows seem to move in slow motion. The potions are toxic even to witches, and overuse can lead to side effects ranging from violent hallucinations to organ failure. But in the heat of combat against a creature that outmatches even a witch's enhanced abilities, these potions can mean the difference between victory and death. The training is as brutal as the mutations. Once a child survives the trials, they are educated in monster lore, taught to identify creatures by their tracks, their feeding patterns, their vulnerabilities. They learn swordplay, not the formal dueling of nobles, but the practical, efficient techniques needed to dispatch a monster quickly and effectively. They practice for hours each day, their enhanced bodies allowing them to train harder and longer than any normal human could endure. Witches carry two swords, one of steel for humans and mundane beasts, and one of silver for monsters. The silver sword is not pure silver, which would be too soft, but steel with silver plating, expensive to maintain and deadly to creatures sensitive to the metal. Why do many monsters fear silver? The lore is unclear, but the most accepted theory is that silver, being a conductor of magical energy, disrupts the supernatural essence that holds post-conjunction beings together. A silver blade through a wraith's form can disperse the spectre back into the ether. A silver sword driven into a werewolf's heart can break whatever curse sustains the transformation. Beyond swords, witches learn simple magic, not the grand sorceries of trained mages, but basic spells they call signs. These are 5 in number, each serving a specific combat function. Ard is a telekinetic blast that can knock back enemies or destroy weak barriers. Igni summons a gout of flame to burn opponents. Erden creates a magical trap on the ground that slows and weakens creatures passing through it. Quen generates a protective shield around the Witcher, absorbing damage, and Axii is a mind-affecting charm that can temporarily calm an aggressive creature or confuse a human opponent. The signs are not powerful enough to replace proper spellcasting, but they are quick to cast, require no elaborate preparation, and can turn the tide of a fight when used cleverly. The witches were organized into schools, each with its own fortress and training grounds. The School of the Wolf, based in the mountain fortress of Kaer Morhen, was one of the oldest and most respected. The School of the Cat produced witches known for their speed and precision, but also for their moral flexibility, taking contracts that wolf witches might refuse. The School of the Griffin focused on a balance between swordplay and sign usage, creating more magically adept witches. The School of the Bear trained warriors who emphasized raw strength and endurance. Each school had its own mutations, slightly different from the others, resulting in witches with varying strengths and weaknesses. The witches served the continent for centuries, wandering the roads, taking contracts, killing monsters. They were never loved. The common folk feared them nearly as much as they feared the monsters. A witch's yellow eyes and pale features marked them as mutants, as something other. Children were told that witches would take them away if they misbehaved. Peasants would hire a witcher to deal with a monster, but then refuse to pay the full fee, knowing the witcher had little recourse. Nobles treated them as useful tools, nothing more. Worse, the supplies needed to create new witches were slowly being lost. The alchemical formulas required for the trials were complex, and the knowledge was guarded jealously by each school. When Kaer Morhen was attacked by a mob of superstitious fanatics, and most of the Wolf School witches were killed, the secrets of the Trial of the Grasses died with them. Other schools met similar fates, destroyed by wars or persecutions or simple attrition. By the time of Geralt of Rivia, witches were a dying breed, aging warriors whose numbers dwindled year by year with no new recruits to replace them. And yet, they continued, because someone had to, because the monsters did not stop hunting simply because humanity decided witches were no longer needed, because in a world of moral ambiguity and shifting alliances, witches followed a code that was perhaps the closest thing to true honor that existed on the continent. They killed monsters. They protected people. They asked for payment, yes, but they kept their word. In a land where kings broke treaties and mages pursued their own agendas regardless of the cost, a witch's contract was binding. The irony is that witches, created to be weapons against monsters, often found themselves dealing with a more fundamental question. What is a monster? Is it the drowner in the swamp that kills to feed? Or the man who threw his infant daughter down a well to spite his wife, creating the curse that transformed her into the drowner in the first place? Is it the vampire who feeds on human blood to survive? Or the nobleman who bleeds his peasants dry through taxes and then hangs those who steal bread to feed their starving children? Witches are taught that a monster is anything that threatens human life. But witches are also given eyes that can see through deceptions, and what they see often troubles them more than any beast. This is the legacy of the witches, orphans transformed into weapons, walking a lonely road between humanity and monstrosity, serving people who fear and despise them, hunting creatures that are perhaps no more monstrous than the men who pay the contract. They are living proof that sometimes the solution to a problem is worse than the problem itself, and sometimes that is still the best solution available. They are the price the continent pays for the conjunction of the spheres, Flesh and blood reminders that when worlds collide, someone has to clean up the mess. The conjunction of the spheres populated the continent with hundreds of species of monsters, but among the most common and most dreaded are the necrophages, creatures that feed on the dead. To understand necrophages, you must first understand that in the world of The Witcher, death is not always an ending. The barriers between life and death were weakened by the conjunction, and in places where death occurs violently or in great numbers, those barriers can wear thin enough for things to slip through. Ghouls are perhaps the most recognizable necrophages, hunched humanoid creatures with pale, corpse-like skin and mouths filled with sharp teeth. They congregate in graveyards and battlefields, drawn by the scent of decay. A ghoul will dig up a fresh grave and devour the corpse within, but they are not merely scavengers. They will attack living humans when hungry enough or when they feel threatened. A pack of ghouls can overwhelm even armed soldiers through sheer numbers and savage ferocity. They are stronger than they look, capable of tearing through armor with their claws, and they carry diseases in their bite that can turn a minor wound into a fatal infection. The owl ghoul is a larger, more dangerous variant of the common ghoul. These creatures have developed hardened bone ridges along their backs that serve as natural armor. An owl ghoul cannot be killed easily. It will regenerate from wounds unless specific steps are taken to prevent it. Witchers know to use certain alchemical oils on their blades when facing owl ghouls, substances that prevent regeneration and make the creature vulnerable. Folk wisdom says that you should never bury anyone near a battlefield without proper rites, because the combination of violent death and mass casualties creates conditions perfect for ghoul infestations. Drowners are another common necrophage, though they haunt waters rather than graves. These creatures lurk in ponds, rivers and swamps, waiting for prey to approach. A drowner looks vaguely humanoid, with webbed hands and feet, fish-like eyes, and pale, bloated skin. They can hold their breath for extended periods, lying motionless at the bottom of a murky pond until an unsuspecting victim wades in. Then they strike, pulling their prey beneath the surface to drown them before feeding. Drowners are created, according to legend, from the souls of those who drowned, either through accident or murder. A well that has claimed a life may become home to a drowner. A river where someone was deliberately drowned might spawn several of the creatures. The drowned dead are related to drowners, but more dangerous. These are corpses reanimated by dark magic or powerful curses. Warriors who fell in water and now serve as guardians or attackers. Unlike drowners, which are living creatures, the drowned dead are true undead, and they retain some memory of their former lives. A drowned dead that was once a soldier might still wear its armor and carry its sword. They fight with a skill that regular drowners lack, making them formidable opponents even for trained fighters. Grave hags are among the most repulsive necrophages. Old women twisted into monstrous forms. They make their lairs in cemeteries, using illusion magic to appear as mourning widows or grieving mothers. When someone approaches, drawn by compassion or curiosity, the grave hag drops her disguise and attacks, using her claws and her ability to vomit a stream of acidic bile. Grave hags feed on corpses, but prefer fresh meat when they can get it. They are intelligent, capable of speech, and sometimes they will negotiate with those who discover their lairs. A grave hag might agree to leave a cemetery alone in exchange for regular offerings of meat, or she might simply kill anyone who knows of her existence to protect her feeding ground. But perhaps the most feared creature in this category is not a necrophage at all, but something else entirely. The Striga. A Striga is created when a curse transforms a person, usually a young girl, into a monster. The curse is specific and requires particular conditions. The cursed individual must be the product of incest, or conceived during a time of great sin, or subjected to a powerful hex by someone with both the knowledge and the hatred to carry it through. The result is a creature that is savage beyond measure, impossibly strong and fast, with claws that can tear through stone and an insatiable hunger for human flesh. A Striga appears humanoid but distorted, with elongated limbs, a hunched posture, and a face that might have once been beautiful, but is now a mask of feral rage. Strigas are nocturnal, hiding in crypts or ruins during the day and emerging at night to hunt. They are drawn to the places they knew in life, which is why a princess transformed into a Striga will haunt her own castle, killing anyone who enters. The strength of a Striga is legendary. One of these creatures can fight multiple armed men simultaneously and emerge victorious. Their speed makes them nearly impossible to track, and their regenerative abilities mean that wounds that would kill other creatures merely slow a Striga down. There is a cure for a Striga, but it is perilous. The cursed individual must be prevented from returning to their lair before dawn. If a Striga can be kept away from its crypt or hiding place until the sun rises, the curse will break and the person will return to human form. This sounds simple, but in practice it means surviving an entire night of combat with a creature that is trying desperately to get past you to reach its lair. The Striga will use every ounce of its considerable strength and ferocity to break through. Most who attempt this cure die in the attempt. Those who succeed earn legendary status among witches. Wraiths are another category of post-mortem creatures, though they are spectres rather than physical beings. A wraith is formed when someone dies violently and their spirit cannot find rest. Unlike necrophages, which are corporeal creatures that can be wounded with ordinary weapons, wraiths are incorporeal, requiring silver or magic to harm them. They appear as translucent, ghostly figures, often wearing the clothes they died in, sometimes showing the wounds that killed them. Wraiths are bound to specific locations, usually the place of their death, and they attack anyone who intrudes on their territory. The noon wraith, also called the mourner, appears during midday in fields and meadows. These are the spirits of young women who died tragically, often brides who were jilted or maidens who died before marriage. A noon wraith appears as a beautiful woman in a white dress, but her beauty is a lure. She will appear to travelers during the hottest part of the day, when the sun beats down mercilessly and rational thought becomes difficult. Those who approach her fall under her spell, dancing with her until they collapse from exhaustion and die. Fighting a noon wraith requires specific preparations. The witcher must paint a Yrden sign at the site of her death and lure her into its field, which will make her corporeal, enough to be struck with a silver blade. The night wraith is similar, but appears after dark, haunting graveyards and places of execution. These spirits are even more violent than noon wraiths, attacking immediately and without subtlety. A night wraith can drain life energy with a touch, weakening her victim until they are too feeble to resist. She can also split into multiple forms, surrounding her prey from all sides. The only way to permanently destroy a night wraith is to find her body, burn it, and consecrate the ashes, ensuring the spirit can finally rest. All of these creatures, from the lowliest ghoul to the most terrible Striga, serve as reminders that the conjunction's legacy is not merely historical. These monsters continue to spawn, continue to hunt, continue to threaten. A battlefield creates the conditions for ghoul infestations. A drowning spawns drowners. A curse births a striga. The past does not stay buried in this world. The dead do not rest quietly. And someone must stand between the living and these horrors from beyond. That someone is the Witcher, walking alone into the darkness with silver blade in hand and a knowledge of monsters that no ordinary person could bear to possess. In the hierarchy of creatures that populate the continent, dragons stand at the apex. These are not the mindless beasts of common fairy tales, but intelligent beings capable of speech, possessed of wisdom that spans centuries, and wielding power that can reshape landscapes. Dragons are not post-conjunction creatures. They existed in this world long before the spheres aligned. They are native to the continent, ancient and terrible and magnificent in equal measure. There are several varieties of dragons, each distinct in appearance and behavior. The true dragons, the great worms, are the most powerful and the most rare. These creatures can grow to enormous size, with wingspans that can blot out the sun and bodies as large as a castle. Their scales are harder than steel, proof against all but the most powerful weapons. They breathe fire hot enough to melt stone, and their intelligence exceeds that of many humans. A great worm might live for thousands of years, accumulating knowledge and treasure in equal measure. Dragons are drawn to precious metals and gems, not out of greed, but because these objects resonate with the magical energies that sustain dragons. A dragon's hoard is not decoration, but necessary to the creature's continued existence. Dragons can speak, and when they do, their voices carry weight beyond mere words. There are accounts of dragons conversing with scholars, debating philosophy and history, revealing knowledge long thought lost. But there are also accounts of dragons devouring entire villages or laying waste to armies. Dragons are neither good nor evil. They are beyond such human categories. They act according to their own natures and their own needs, and humans are wise to stay out of their way. The golden dragons are the rarest of all, and they possess an ability that sets them apart. They can shapeshift, taking on human form at will. A golden dragon might walk among humans for years, living as a merchant or a scholar, never revealing their true nature. Why they do this is unclear. Perhaps they find human society interesting. Perhaps they wish to influence events from within. Perhaps they simply grow bored with the isolation that comes from being one of the most powerful creatures alive. Golden dragons in human form are often beautiful, charismatic, and eerily perceptive. They can maintain their disguise perfectly, but they retain their draconic strength and magic, making them formidable even when not in their true form. But not all dragons are ancient and wise. The forktail is a smaller draconic species, more common and far less intelligent than true dragons. A forktail is roughly the size of a large horse, with a long serpentine body, 2 legs, and bat-like wings. Its tail ends in a distinctive fork, hence the name. And this tail is as dangerous as any weapon, capable of delivering venomous stings or crushing blows. Forktails are aggressive and territorial, attacking anything that enters their hunting grounds. They cannot breathe fire, but they can spit venom, and their claws can tear through armor. Forktails are not intelligent enough to converse with humans, but they are cunning hunters, using ambush tactics and aerial superiority to take down prey larger than themselves. Wyverns are another variety of 2-legged dragon, larger than forktails and even more aggressive. A wyvern's wings are its primary mode of locomotion on the ground, the creature using them like forelegs when not flying. Wyverns are found in remote areas, rocky mountains, and desolate wastelands. They feed on large herbivores and are not above attacking humans when the opportunity presents itself. A wyvern's tail carries a potent poison that causes necrosis, the flesh around the wound turning black and dying. There is no antidote for wyvern venom. The only treatment is to cut away the dead tissue before the poison spreads. Witches hunting wyverns must be extraordinarily careful, for a single successful strike from the creature's tail can mean a lingering, painful death. The royal wyvern is a rare and terrifying variant, larger than common wyverns and far more dangerous. These creatures develop thick, armored hides that can deflect arrows and even sword strikes. Their venom is more potent, and they are intelligent enough to use tactics in combat, feinting and circling to find openings in their opponent's defense. A royal wyvern is considered a challenge even for experienced witches, and many contracts for these creatures go unfulfilled because the risk is simply too great for the reward offered. Basilisks are draconids that have adapted to life on the ground, losing the ability to fly in exchange for heavier armor and more powerful offensive capabilities. A basilisk resembles a large wingless dragon with a thick, segmented body and a head crowned with frills and horns. They move surprisingly fast for their size and can leap great distances. Basilisks spit acid rather than fire, a corrosive substance that can melt through metal and flesh with equal ease. They are found in ruins and underground lairs, places where flying would be impractical. Basilisks are intelligent enough to lay traps, using their acid to weaken structural support and cause cave-ins that trap or kill intruders. Cockatrices are smaller draconids, no larger than a large dog, but they possess a particularly nasty ability. Their gaze can petrify victims, turning living flesh to stone. This is not a magical attack in the traditional sense, but a form of venom that the cockatrice injects through specialized glands near its eyes. The gaze is actually a spit attack, but it happens so quickly that victims often believe they were turned to stone simply by meeting the creature's eyes. Cockatrices are scavengers more than hunters, but they will defend their territories aggressively. They make their nests in caves and abandoned buildings, and they are attracted to places where death has occurred, feeding on corpses when they can find them. The legend of dragons fighting knights is well known throughout the continent, but the reality is more complex than the tales suggest. Dragons do not attack villages without reason. When a dragon raids human settlements, it is usually because the settlement encroached on the dragon's territory, or because humans disturbed the dragon's hoard, or because the dragon is old and sick and desperate for food. The knights who slay dragons in the stories are often glorified hunters, or simply liars who found a dragon's corpse and claimed credit for the kill. But there are those who hunt dragons for more practical reasons. Dragon scales are incredibly valuable, useful for crafting armor that can resist both physical and magical attacks. Dragon blood has alchemical properties, and dragon hearts are said to grant extraordinary powers to those who consume them, though such tales are more superstition than fact. Dragon bones can be carved into weapons or tools that hold enchantments better than any other material. Because of this, dragons are perpetually at risk from poachers and hunters despite their power. The relationship between witches and dragons is complicated. Witches are trained to kill monsters, but dragons are not, strictly speaking, monsters. They are sapient beings, capable of reason and negotiation. A witcher who kills a dragon without cause would be violating the unwritten code that most witches follow. That said, if a dragon is genuinely threatening human lives and no other solution can be found, a witcher will take the contract. It is a decision that weighs heavily on those who make it, for killing a creature that can speak and reason feels different from dispatching a mindless beast. There are those who believe that dragons, being native to the world and possessed of ancient magic, have a special understanding of the conjunction and its consequences. Some scholars theorize that dragons remember the time before the conjunction, that they witnessed the event and know secrets about its nature that other races have forgotten. If this is true, the dragons are not sharing their knowledge. They keep their own counsel, flying above the petty concerns of humans and elves, living their long lives according to rhythms and purposes that shorter-lived species cannot comprehend. And so the dragons endure, fewer in number than they once were, but still present, still powerful, still commanding respect and fear from all who encounter them. They are living legends, proof that some myths are real and some monsters are magnificent. They are reminders that the continent is not tamed, not fully known, and that there are beings in this world who owe allegiance to no king and answer to no god. Before humans, before the conjunction, before the rise of kingdoms and the fall of empires, the elder races ruled the continent. The name encompasses several distinct peoples, the elves, the dwarves, the gnomes, and other races whose names have been forgotten or whose numbers have dwindled to the point of extinction. These were the original inhabitants, the ones who shaped the land and gave it its first civilizations. Their legends are older than human memory, their accomplishments greater than any human kingdom has yet achieved, and their decline serves as a warning about the impermanence of all things. The elves were the first and greatest of the elder races. They call themselves the Enseide, which means people of the hills in their ancient tongue, though this is a name they adopted after their migration to the continent. Before that, they were simply the people, for there were no others to distinguish themselves from. Elves are functionally immortal, aging so slowly that a century might add only a few lines to their faces. This longevity gave them time to perfect their arts, their magic, their understanding of the world. The great elven cities were marvels of architecture and enchantment, structures that blended seamlessly with the natural landscape, buildings that would grow and change over centuries according to need and aesthetic preference. Elven magic was not the crude, forceful sorcery that humans practice. It was subtle, woven into the very fabric of reality, shaping events through gentle nudges rather than violent impositions. An elf mage might spend decades crafting a single spell, layering intention upon intention until the magic became self-sustaining, requiring no further intervention. The forests themselves were under elven protection, and the trees responded to elven will, growing in patterns that created natural defenses or pathways only elves could navigate. The elves had their own gods, though whether these were actual divine beings or simply powerful spirits or ancient elves whose deeds had been mythologized is unclear. The most prominent of these deities were the deities of the mountains, valleys, and waters, nature spirits who represented the fundamental forces of the world. Elves worshipped through ritual and song, through the creation of beautiful things and the preservation of sacred places. They had no concept of evil gods or devils. In their cosmology, all forces were part of the natural order and deserved respect, even those that humans might find frightening. One of the most enduring elven legends is the tale of Eiliren, the White Rose of Sherewed. She was a young elven maiden who, seeing her people slowly pushed out by human expansion, gathered other young elves and attempted to fight back. The rebellion was doomed from the start. The elves were too few and the humans too many. Ailerin and her followers were slaughtered to the last, but her defiance became a symbol for elven resistance. To this day, some elves honor her memory, seeing her not as a tragic fool, but as a hero who refused to accept the slow extinction of her race. The tale of Lara Dorren is perhaps more famous, though far more controversial. Lara Dorren ep Sheadal was an elven sorceress of immense power, one of the knowing ones, the sages who studied magic at its deepest levels. She was also heir to the Elder Blood, a genetic lineage that granted powers beyond even those of normal elven mages. Lara was supposed to marry a carefully chosen elf to continue the bloodline, but she fell in love with a human mage named Cregennan of Lod. This union was seen as a betrayal by her own people, for it meant the Elder Blood would be diluted, passed into human lineage where it might be lost forever. Lara and Cregennan fled together, but they were pursued by both elves and humans who saw their love as a threat. In the end, Cregennan was killed, and Lara died giving birth to their half-elven daughter, and with her death, the dream of a pure Elder Blood lineage died as well. Or so it seemed. In truth, the Elder Blood continued through Lara's descendants, mostly dormant, but occasionally manifesting in individuals of exceptional power. This lineage would eventually lead to Ciri, the child of Elder Blood, but that is a tale interwoven with prophecy and destiny that we will address in its proper place. The dwarves are more pragmatic than elves, shorter in stature but broader and far more resilient. They live perhaps 2 or 3 times as long as humans, giving them enough time to master a craft, but not so long that they lose touch with the passage of years. Dwarves are master smiths, miners and engineers, and their mountain kingdoms are marvels of construction, vast halls carved from living rock, supported by pillars that will stand for millennia. The forges of the dwarves produce weapons and armor of such quality that they are prized throughout the continent, and dwarven steel is the foundation upon which a witcher's silver sword is built. Dwarves have their own legends, though they are less inclined to share them with outsiders. One of their oldest tales speaks of the Deep Roads, a network of tunnels that once connected all dwarven holds, allowing travel underground across vast distances. These roads are now mostly sealed or collapsed, lost during the wars that followed the conjunction. It is said that things lurk in the abandoned sections of the deep roads, creatures that the dwarves deliberately sealed away rather than attempt to destroy, and that anyone foolish enough to explore those tunnels will not return. Another dwarven legend tells of the Forge of the First King, a mythical location where the very first dwarven monarch created weapons of surpassing power. Blades that could cut through stone as easily as cloth. Armor that could turn aside any blow. The location of this forge has been lost, and many believe it never existed, that it is simply a metaphor for the ideal of perfect craftsmanship. But some dwarven smiths spend their entire lives searching for clues, believing that if the forge could be found and its secrets learned, the dwarves might reclaim the glory they once possessed. The gnomes are even shorter than dwarves and far less commonly seen. They are inventors and tinkers, fascinated by mechanisms and devices. Gnomish clockwork is famous throughout the land, and any noble who can afford it will have gnomish clocks and music boxes in their collection. But gnomes are also reclusive, preferring to live in isolated communities where they can work without distraction. Their legends speak of great machines built in ancient times, devices that could reshape landscapes or predict the future, or harness magical energies in ways that modern mages cannot replicate. Most humans dismiss these stories as exaggerations, but scholars who have studied gnomish ruins claim there is evidence of technologies far beyond anything currently understood. There are other elder races, though so diminished that they are more myth than reality. The Vran were a reptilian species, intelligent and cultured, who built cities in what is now the swamps and jungles of far southern lands. They vanished long before humans arrived, leaving behind only ruins and enigmatic artifacts. The Werabubs were shapeshifters, able to take on the form of any creature they consumed. They too are gone, though some claim that Werabubs still exist in the deepest forests, hiding among other species, impossible to distinguish from the forms they have adopted. All of these races share a common fate: decline. The conjunction brought humans, and humans brought change, and the elder races could not adapt quickly enough. Elves, with their low birth rates and long lives, could not compete with human population growth. Dwarves, isolated in their mountain holes, found themselves surrounded by human kingdoms and forced to trade on unfavorable terms. Gnomes retreated into obscurity. The elder races are dying, not from any single catastrophe, but from simple demographic pressure. Each generation sees fewer of them, more humans, and the balance shifts further. And yet, they endure. Elven communities still exist, hidden in forests or in the far north where humans rarely venture. Dwarves maintain their holds and their crafts. Gnomes continue to invent. They remember what they were, they mourn what they have lost, and they pass down their legends to those few who remain. These legends are more than stories. They are the cultural memory of peoples who shaped the world, who built civilizations that lasted thousands of years, who knew magic and beauty that modern humans cannot even imagine. To lose these legends would be to lose something irreplaceable, a perspective on existence that only immortal or near immortal beings can possess. The elder races watch humanity and wonder if humans will ultimately suffer the same fate. Every empire falls. Every civilization decays. The elves thought themselves eternal, and they were wrong. Perhaps humans, confident in their dominance, are making the same mistake. Or perhaps humans, with their relentless drive and rapid adaptation, truly are different, the species that will endure where others could not. Only time will tell, and time is one resource the elder races have in abundance, even as their numbers dwindle to nothing. In the complex tapestry of the continent's history, few threads are as significant or as mysterious as the elder blood. This is not merely a genetic curiosity, but a power that can reshape reality, a legacy that spans races and generations, and the subject of prophecies that speak of salvation or doom. To understand the elder blood is to understand one of the deepest mysteries of the world. The elder blood, called Henikr in the elder speech, is a genetic trait that grants its carriers extraordinary magical abilities. Unlike the magic that mages learn through study and practice, the elder blood is innate, expressing itself as powers that go beyond anything even the most skilled sorcerers can achieve. Chief among these is the ability to open gates between worlds, to tear holes in reality and step through into other dimensions. This is an ability that, in theory, could allow travel between any 2 points in the multiverse, making the carrier of the elder blood the most valuable and dangerous person alive. The origin of the elder blood lies in a deliberate breeding program conducted by the elves millennia ago. The En-Severn, the Knowing Ones, studied the innate abilities of unicorns, mysterious beings who possessed natural magic related to dimensional travel. The sages sought to replicate this ability in elves, creating a person who could open what they called the Ard Gate, the gate of the world. This was not mere curiosity. The elves foresaw a time when their world would become uninhabitable, and they wanted an escape route, a way to flee to other dimensions if necessary. The breeding program was conducted with clinical precision over countless generations. Certain elven families were selected for their magical potential, and marriages were arranged to concentrate the desired traits. The program succeeded, after a fashion, creating the elder blood lineage. But the power was unstable, manifesting unpredictably, sometimes skipping generations, sometimes appearing in forms the sages had not anticipated. The prophecy that drives so much of the continent's recent history comes from Ithlin Egli, Aeb, Evenian, an elven prophet and oracle who lived centuries ago. Ithlin was a diviner, one who could see possible futures, and what she saw terrified her. She prophesied the end of the world, an apocalypse of ice and darkness that she called the White Frost. According to her vision, the world would die, all life would perish, and only a child of elder blood could prevent or perhaps survive this catastrophe. The exact words of Ithlin's prophecy have been preserved. The era of the sword and axe is nigh, the era of the wolf's blizzard. The time of the white chill and the white light is nigh, the time of madness and the time of contempt. The world will die amidst frost and be reborn with the new sun. It will be reborn of elder blood, of Hen Iker, of the seed that has been sown. This prophecy has been interpreted in countless ways. Some believe it speaks of literal rebirth, that the child of elder blood will create a new world after the old one dies. Others think it refers to survival, that the child will be able to escape to another dimension, carrying the remnants of civilization with them. Still others see it as metaphorical, a warning about cycles of destruction and renewal that have nothing to do with actual apocalypse. What is certain is that the prophecy has shaped the actions of powers across the continent. Empires seek the child of elder blood, hoping to control this power. The Lodge of Sorceresses, a secret cabal of powerful mages, plots to use the prophecy for their own ends, believing they can guide or manipulate the child. Elven rebels see the prophecy as proof that an elf, or at least someone of elven heritage, will ultimately save their people. Everyone wants to control destiny, and the elder blood is the key to that control. The last known carrier of the undiluted elder blood was Lara Dorren, the elven sorceress whose tragic love story we have already touched upon. When she died giving birth to her half-human daughter, many believed the elder blood had been lost forever, diluted beyond recovery by human genetics. They were wrong. The gene continued, dormant, passing through generations of Lara's descendants. It manifested in Rhiannon, Lara's granddaughter, though she could not control her powers and was feared by those around her. It appeared again in Adalia, called the Mad, a queen whose visions and powers led to her being declared insane and imprisoned. The elder blood continued through royal bloodlines, specifically the houses of Sintra and Skellige, until it reached Pavetta of Sintra. Pavetta's power manifested during an emotional crisis, creating a magical storm that nearly destroyed everything around her. She had some degree of control, enough to stop the destruction before it consumed everyone, but her power frightened those who witnessed it. Pavetta bore a daughter, Cyrilla, and with Ciri, the elder blood manifested in its strongest form in centuries. Ciri is the child of elder blood that the prophecy speaks of, or so many believe. She possesses all the powers of her lineage, the ability to travel between worlds, though she cannot yet control it, premonitions and visions of possible futures, and a raw magical potential that exceeds anything even powerful sorceresses like Yennefer possess. Ciri's power is so great that her very blood has alchemical properties, capable of enhancing magical rituals or, in theory, creating new witches. This makes her valuable not just for the prophecy, but for practical, immediate reasons. The pursuit of Ciri drives much of the conflict in the later years of the continent's history. Nilfgaard seeks her because Emperor Emir var Emreis is her biological father, and he believes that controlling Ciri will give him dominion over the world. The elves want her because they see her as the fulfillment of Ithlin's prophecy, the one who will save their race from extinction. The Lodge of Sorceresses wants to use her as a pawn in their political games. The Wild Hunt, a mysterious force from another dimension, pursues her for their own dark reasons. But the prophecy is not as clear-cut as any of these factions believe. Prophecies in this world are not fixed destinies, but glimpses of possible futures. The very act of trying to fulfill or prevent a prophecy can change the outcome. Ciri herself is not merely a vessel for the Elder Blood, but a person with agency, someone who can make choices that the prophecy makers never anticipated. She is trained as a witcher, learning to fight and survive in ways that no child of Elder Blood was ever meant to. She experiences hardship and loss that shape her into someone stronger and more complex than anyone expected. The Elder Blood, for all its power, is also a curse. Those who carry it are hunted, used, manipulated. They live under the weight of expectations and prophecies they never asked for. Lara Dorren died because of her blood. Pavetta died under mysterious circumstances that some believe were connected to her power. Ciri suffers through trauma after trauma, her childhood stolen, her identity constantly in question, her very existence a threat to the stability of the world. And yet, the Elder Blood represents hope as well. If the prophecy is true, if the world truly faces an apocalyptic end, then the child of Elder Blood may be the only hope of survival. Not because of destiny or fate, but because of choice, because of the decision that a person with ultimate power makes when faced with ultimate crisis. The Elder Blood is not about genetics alone, but about what the carrier does with the gift they have been given, whether they use it for others or for themselves, whether they embrace destiny or forge their own path. This is the heart of the mystery. The Elder Blood is a power, a prophecy, and a person, all intertwined in ways that cannot be separated. It is the past reaching into the future, the elves' desperate plan to save themselves becoming humanity's potential salvation. It is proof that actions have consequences that ripple across centuries, that a breeding program begun in the distant past will determine the fate of the world in the present. And it is a reminder that power, no matter how great, is meaningless without wisdom and will to use it well. Water has always held a special significance in folklore, a liminal space between land and the unknown depths, and the continent's waters are home to creatures both wondrous and terrible. These are the spirits and monsters of rivers, lakes, and seas, beings whose origins predate the conjunction, tied to the continent itself through bonds older than any written history. The Vodyanoi are intelligent aquatic beings, somewhat frog-like in appearance, but with distinctly humanoid characteristics. They stand upright, possess opposable thumbs, and have developed a complex society in the underwater kingdoms beneath the continent's lakes and rivers. The Vodyanoi have their own language, their own culture, their own religion. They worship a deity they call the Water Lord, an ancient entity that may be a god, or simply a particularly powerful and old Vodyanoi. Their priests are called water lords as well, shamans who can perform water magic and who serve as leaders of Vodyanoi communities. The relationship between Vodyanoi and humans is complicated. In ancient times, before human expansion became overwhelming, there were Vodyanoi kingdoms that traded with surface dwellers. The Vodyanoi are skilled craftsmen, capable of working metal underwater through techniques that surface dwellers do not understand. They create amulets and figurines from a special clay called Vod, which humans prize for its supposed magical properties. The Vodyanoi are willing to trade these items for offerings, particularly food, but they are also territorial and will attack humans who pollute their waters or disturb their sacred sites. Vodyanoi society is matriarchal in some communities and governed by priest kings in others. They build underwater structures using stone and a form of underwater mortar that remains stable even in strong currents. These structures include temples dedicated to the Water Lord, spawning grounds protected by warrior caste Vodyanoi, and workshops where craftsmen create the items that form the basis of their economy. The Vodyanoi have a complex relationship with death. They believe that deceased Vodyanoi are reborn as Vodyanoi spirits called Vodniks, which serve as guardians and advisors to the living. The Vodyanoi are not universally hostile to humans, but they are protective of their territory and will organize themselves into warbands when they feel threatened. A Vodyanoi warrior is dangerous, wielding weapons forged specifically for underwater combat and possessing natural armor in the form of thick scaled skin. They can breathe water and air with equal ease, allowing them to attack fishing villages or assault boats from below. The Vodyanoi have been known to drag humans underwater, not always to kill them, but sometimes to take them as prisoners or sacrifices to the Water Lord. Rusalki are far more dangerous and far less rational. These are the spirits of women who drowned, usually young women who died by suicide or were murdered and thrown into water. The trauma of their deaths transforms them into vengeful spirits that haunt the waters where they died. A Rusalka appears as a beautiful woman with pale skin and dark hair, often nude, or wearing only tattered remnants of the clothing she died in. Her beauty is a weapon. She uses it to lure men to the water's edge, where she will drag them beneath the surface to drown them. Unlike Vodyanoi, Rusalki are not capable of reason or negotiation. They are driven by rage and sorrow, compelled to reenact their own deaths by causing others to drown. A Rusalka's touch is cold, draining warmth and life from anyone she grasps. Her song is hypnotic, compelling those who hear it to come to the water. Some accounts say that a Rusalka can leave the water during moonlit nights, walking on land to hunt, but she must return to her body of water before dawn, or she will dissolve into mist. There is folklore about how to deal with Rusalki. Some say that if you can discover the circumstances of the woman's death and give her a proper burial, her spirit will be released and the Rusalka will vanish. Others claim that certain herbs or charms can ward off a Rusalka's influence. Witches know that a Rusalka can be destroyed with a silver sword, but getting close enough to strike without falling under her spell is the challenge. Some witches use Erden signs to create barriers that disrupt the Rusalka's ability to move freely, giving them openings to attack. Drowners, which we discussed earlier as necrophages, are related to Rusalki in folklore. Both are associated with drowning deaths, but drowners are physical creatures while Rusalki are spirits. Some scholars believe that Rusalki are what form when a woman drowns. while drowners are created from male drowning victims, though this distinction is not universally accepted. What is certain is that any body of water where people have drowned becomes dangerous, potentially home to one or more of these creatures. Water hags are another category of water-dwelling monster, distinct from rusalki. These are living creatures, not spirits, though they are undeniably supernatural. A water hag looks like a deformed old woman with scaled green-grey skin, bulbous eyes, and a mouth full of needle-sharp teeth. They are amphibious, comfortable in water, but capable of moving on land when necessary. Water hags are more intelligent than drowners, capable of speech and rudimentary tool use. They sometimes bargain with humans, offering information or safe passage through their territory in exchange for food or treasure. But water hags are fundamentally predatory. They prefer to attack from ambush, using their ability to breathe underwater to hide at the bottom of murky ponds or rivers. When prey approaches, the hag lunges, using her long tongue to ensnare the victim and pull them close enough to bite. Water hags can also vomit a stream of toxic bile that burns skin and causes disorientation. They are matriarchal creatures, with older, larger hags dominating younger ones and claiming the best hunting territories. The legend of the Lady of the Lake is perhaps the most famous water-related tale on the continent, though whether the lady is myth or reality is debated. According to legend, the lady is a powerful entity that dwells in a lake hidden deep in the forest. She is said to give gifts to worthy individuals, weapons of surpassing quality or knowledge that cannot be found elsewhere. Some say she is a goddess, others that she is an immortal sorceress, still others that she is a manifestation of the lake itself given consciousness. Those who seek her out rarely find her, and those who do find her do not always return to tell the tale. Water spirits in general are treated with respect by the common folk of the continent. Fishermen make offerings to ensure safe passage and good catches. Villagers near lakes will throw flowers into the water on certain feast days to appease whatever dwells below. Mills are often built with small shrines nearby, places where the miller can leave gifts for the water spirits, ensuring they do not interfere with the mill's operation. These practices are dismissed by educated city dwellers as superstition, but those who live near water know better than to take chances. The seas around the continent are home to creatures even more mysterious than those of inland waters. Sailors speak of sea serpents, vast creatures that can capsize ships with a single motion. They tell tales of merfolk, beings that are half human and half fish, who sometimes help sailors in distress, but more often lure them to their deaths. The deeper oceans remain largely unexplored, and what lies in those abyssal depths is unknown. Some believe that ancient civilizations exist on the ocean floor, kingdoms that predate even the elves, populated by beings that have never seen sunlight. Others claim that the true monsters dwell in the deep, creatures so large and powerful that they would dwarf even dragons, sleeping in the darkness until something disturbs them. Water, in all its forms, represents the boundary between the known and unknown. The surface is where humans live and feel safe, but beneath the surface is an alien world, a place where human rules and human logic do not apply. The creatures that dwell there are reminders that the continent is not fully tamed, that there are still places where humans are not welcome, where they are prey rather than predator. A witcher who takes a contract involving water-dwelling monsters approaches it with more caution than most other hunts, for fighting underwater or near water gives the creature every advantage and the hunter none. the water spirits and monsters are as much a part of the world as the land dwellers, and they will endure long after human kingdoms have crumbled to dust. The forests of the continent are ancient, some of them dating back to before the elder races arrived, before any sapient beings walked beneath their boughs. These primeval woods are not merely collections of trees, but living entities in their own right, places where the boundary between the material world and the realm of spirits is thin. The creatures that inhabit the deepest forests are called relics, beings that existed before the conjunction and represent the old magic of the world itself. The Leshen, also called a Leshi or Leshi depending on the region, is perhaps the most feared forest spirit. A Leshen is a towering humanoid figure made of wood and plant matter, with a skull for a head, usually that of a deer or elk, and long, branching antlers. Its body is composed of twisted roots and branches, and it can command the plants around it to attack intruders. A Leshen is the guardian of its forest, an entity that maintains the balance of nature within its domain. Where a Leshen dwells, the forest is healthy, the animals are plentiful, and the trees grow strong. But Leshens are not benevolent. They are indifferent to human concerns, viewing people as intruders who must be driven away or destroyed. A Leshen can sense disturbances in its forest, feeling when trees are cut or when hunters kill too many animals. It will respond by attacking the offenders, using the forest itself as a weapon. The Leshen can control wolves and bears, turning them into an army. It can cause roots to burst from the ground and entangle victims. It can summon murder crows, flocks of birds that attack in coordinated swarms, pecking and clawing at any creature the Leshen marks as a threat. Fighting a Leshen is extraordinarily difficult. The creature can teleport through its forest, disappearing in a swirl of leaves and reappearing elsewhere, making it nearly impossible to pin down. It is protected by the plants around it, which will grow to shield it from attacks. The only effective strategy is to destroy the totems that the Leshen uses to anchor its power. Wooden structures marked with runes and adorned with animal skulls. Destroying these totems weakens the Leshen, making it vulnerable. But finding the totems requires searching through miles of dangerous forest, while the Leshen and its servants hunt you. Some communities worship Leshens, leaving offerings at the edge of the forest to appease the spirit. These villages understand that they exist at the Leshen's mercy, that the forest could reclaim them at any time if the spirit willed it. They restrict their logging, hunt only what they need, and never venture into the deepest parts of the forest. In return, the Leshen tolerates their presence, perhaps even protects them from other threats. But if the arrangement is broken, if the villagers become greedy or forget their respect, the Leshen will remind them who truly rules the woods. Godlings are smaller, less threatening forest spirits, though they are no less magical. A godling resembles a small humanoid, perhaps 3 feet tall, with features that are almost childlike but distinctly inhuman. They have the ability to create illusions, to make themselves and their homes invisible to casual observation. Godlings are curious and playful, sometimes helpful, but often mischievous. They might lead a lost traveler back to the path, or they might lead them in circles for hours, laughing at their confusion. Godlings are generally harmless, though they can be dangerous if angered or threatened. They have ties to specific locations, usually small groves or clearings that they guard. A godling's domain will be marked by strange phenomena. Mushroom rings, trees that grow in impossible patterns, stones arranged in configurations that no human laid. Godlings can be bargained with. They appreciate gifts, particularly food and shiny objects, and they will sometimes grant small favors in return. But they are also capricious, and what seems like a blessing from a godling might turn out to be a curse in disguise. Sylvans are another category of forest creature, resembling the satyrs of ancient mythology. They have the upper body of a man and the lower body of a goat, with small horns protruding from their heads. Sylvans are intelligent, capable of speech, and they have developed a limited form of culture. They live in small groups, hidden in remote forests, and they make their living through a combination of foraging, hunting, and raiding. Sylvans are generally peaceful toward those who do not threaten them, but they are protective of their territories and will fight fiercely if cornered. The relationship between Sylvans and humans is complicated by the fact that some humans hunt Sylvans for their body parts, which are believed to have alchemical or magical properties. This has made Sylvans understandably hostile toward human intrusion. A witcher faced with a Sylvan contract must determine whether the Sylvan is genuinely threatening humans, or whether humans have provoked it through their own actions. Witchers who follow their code will not kill a Sylvan that is merely defending its home, though not all witchers are so scrupulous. Spriggans are plant-based creatures, guardians of specific trees or groves. They appear as small humanoid figures made entirely of wood and leaves, no larger than a child. When threatened, a spriggan can grow to enormous size, becoming a towering monster that rivals a Leshen in power. Spriggans are encountered rarely, as they prefer to remain dormant, indistinguishable from the trees they protect. But if someone attempts to harm the spriggan's tree, the creature will awaken and defend it with lethal force. The only way to truly defeat a spriggan is to destroy its core tree, but doing so requires getting past the spriggan first, a daunting task. Fiends are massive, intelligent beasts that roam the deepest forests and the most desolate plains. A fiend resembles a huge elk or moose, but with a third eye in the center of its forehead and a coat of shaggy, dark fur. Despite their appearance, fiends are not merely animals, but something more, creatures touched by old magic. The third eye gives them hypnotic powers. A fiend can lock gazes with an opponent and confuse or terrify them, leaving them vulnerable to attack. Fiends are territorial and aggressive, and they see humans as threats to be eliminated. Hunting a fiend requires specific preparation. The hypnotic eye must be countered, either through magic or by blinding it temporarily. The creature's size and strength make direct combat dangerous. A fiend can gore a man on its antlers and toss the body aside as if it weighed nothing. Witches sometimes use bombs or traps to weaken a fiend before engaging it directly, and they avoid looking at the third eye, focusing instead on its body to prevent being caught in its gaze. The forests are also home to numerous lesser spirits and creatures, pixies and sprites, tiny flying beings that are more nuisance than threat, barghest, spectral hounds that hunt in packs, woodwoads, animated trees that attack anything that moves. Each of these creatures is a remnant of the old world, proof that magic is not merely something brought by the conjunction, but something that has always existed in certain places. The old folk of the continent understand this. They know that some forests are sacred, that some groves must never be disturbed, that certain paths should not be walked after dark. They tell stories to their children about what happens to those who disrespect the forest, tales of hunters who disappeared and were found years later, mad and babbling, or not found at all. These are not mere stories meant to frighten. They are survival wisdom, knowledge passed down through generations about how to coexist with forces that humans do not fully understand and cannot control. The tragedy is that each generation forgets a little more. The old respect for the forest is eroded by the need for farmland, for timber, for expansion. And as the forests shrink, so too do the relics. Some species are already nearly extinct. Others have retreated to the most remote wilderness, places where humans rarely venture. The Leshens guard their diminishing domains with increasing ferocity, knowing that each tree felled brings the day closer when there will be no forest left for them to protect. The spirits of the woods are ancient, but they are not eternal. Even magic fades when there is nowhere left for it to dwell. Not all post-conjunction creatures are mindless beasts. Among the beings that arrived during the cataclysm were vampires, an entire species that should never have existed in this world, but which has adapted remarkably well to its new environment. Vampires in the world of The Witcher are not the undead of folklore, but living creatures with their own biology, culture, and moral codes. They are among the most dangerous opponents a Witcher can face, not merely because of their physical power, but because of their intelligence and adaptability. Vampires are divided into several distinct species, each with different capabilities and levels of intelligence. At the lowest end are the Devourers, feral creatures that are barely sentient. A Devourer looks like a withered corpse with elongated limbs and a distended belly. These creatures lurk in crypts and ruins, feeding on dead flesh when they can find it, attacking living prey when necessary. Devourers can vomit a stream of acidic bile and are surprisingly quick despite their emaciated appearance. They are considered low-level threats by experienced witchers, dangerous primarily in numbers. Algals, which we discussed earlier as necrophages, are actually a form of vampire according to some classifications, though this is disputed. They exhibit vampiric traits, including a form of regeneration and a hunger for flesh, but they lack the intelligence of true vampires. Catechans are mid-tier vampires, intelligent and capable of speech. A catechan can take on human form, appearing as a normal person, though their true form is that of a hulking, bat-like creature with claws and fangs. Catechans feed on blood, but are not mindless about it. They can control their hunger and often integrate into human society, taking blood in small amounts from victims who do not even realize they have been fed upon. A catechan's saliva contains an anesthetic and an amnesiac compound, allowing them to feed without the victim remembering the encounter. However, catechans are still monsters. They are driven by hunger, and when that hunger becomes overwhelming, they lose control, becoming savage killers. A catechan in a feeding frenzy can slaughter dozens before the hunger is sated. They are powerful fighters, stronger than humans, and capable of regenerating from wounds that would be fatal to lesser creatures. Fighting a catechan requires preparation. Certain oils can be applied to blades to prevent regeneration, and specific potions can protect a witcher from the catechan's claws and bite. Bruxai are female vampires, extraordinarily dangerous and deceptively beautiful. A bruxa appears as a stunning woman, using her appearance to lure victims. Her true form is monstrous, with pale skin, black eyes, and a mouthful of fangs. Bruxae possess a sonic scream that can stun or even kill those caught in its blast, and they can move with supernatural speed, appearing to teleport short distances. A bruxa is intelligent enough to plan and execute complex strategies, and she will use every advantage to ensure her prey cannot escape. The relationship between bruxa and humans is complicated. Some bruxae genuinely integrate into human society, controlling their hunger and living peacefully among those they could easily prey upon. Others are predators who view humans as nothing more than food. A witcher facing a bruxa contract must determine which type they are dealing with, and this is not always easy. A bruxa who has been living peacefully for years might slip and kill someone, triggering a contract. Is she a monster that must be destroyed, or a person who made a mistake? The answer is not clear, and different witches might make different choices. At the apex of vampire society are the higher vampires, and these beings are in a category entirely separate from their lesser kin. Higher vampires are essentially immortal, immune to aging and disease. They can only be killed by another higher vampire. All other methods of destruction merely inconvenience them, causing their bodies to regenerate over time. A higher vampire can take on perfect human form, so perfect that even a witch's enhanced senses cannot detect the deception. They do not need to feed on blood to survive, though many enjoy it. They are stronger, faster, and more magically powerful than any other vampire species. Higher vampires have their own culture and society, separate from and invisible to humans. They are cosmopolitan, often well-educated, and they view themselves as superior to both humans and lesser vampires. Some higher vampires live among humans as respected members of society, doctors or scholars or merchants, never revealing their true nature. Others isolate themselves, viewing humanity with the same detachment that humans might view ants. The most famous higher vampire in recent history is Emil Regis Rohelek Tertiev Godefroy, known simply as Regis, who travelled with Geralt of Rivia for a time. Regis represented the best of what higher vampires could be: intelligent, compassionate, genuinely interested in helping others. He was also proof that higher vampires could not be simply categorized as monsters. Regis had committed terrible acts in his youth when he was drunk on blood and power, but he had changed, choosing to live according to a code of ethics that many humans would struggle to follow. This raises the fundamental question that plagues all witches: what is a monster? If a higher vampire lives peacefully, harms no one, contributes to society, is it still a monster that should be hunted? If a human murders and tortures for pleasure, is he less of a monster than a vampire who kills only to feed? The Witcher's Code says that sapient beings should be reasoned with before violence is employed, but the code also acknowledges that some beings are too dangerous to allow to exist. Where is the line? There are other higher beings that arrive during the conjunction, creatures that do not fit neatly into categories. Dopplers are shapeshifters, capable of taking on the exact appearance of any person they observe. Unlike catechans, whose shapeshifting is limited to their human and monstrous forms, a Doppler can become anyone, copying their appearance, voice, and even memories with disturbing accuracy. Dopplers are generally peaceful, using their abilities to survive rather than to harm. But a Doppler's shapeshifting makes them incredibly dangerous in the wrong hands. They can be hired as spies or assassins, replacing someone in a position of power without anyone knowing. Jinn are beings of immense magical power, creatures from another dimension, who sometimes manifest in this world. They are not genies who grant wishes in the fairy tale sense, though they can alter reality in ways that seem like wish fulfillment. Jinn are bound by complex rules about how they interact with the physical world, and they often resent being summoned or controlled by mages. An angry Jinn can cause catastrophic destruction, leveling buildings and killing dozens with casual ease. The wise course of action when encountering a Jinn is to leave it alone, but mages are rarely wise when power is within reach. These higher beings represent a challenge to the simple monster and hunter dichotomy. They are intelligent, often more intelligent than humans. They have ethics and codes of conduct, even if those codes are alien to human understanding. They can be reasoned with, negotiated with, even befriended. And yet, they are also dangerous, possessing abilities that make them existential threats to human communities. A witcher must navigate this complexity, making decisions that will determine whether beings live or die, often with incomplete information and under considerable pressure. The existence of higher beings also raises theological questions. If vampires are not undead but living creatures, does that mean they have souls? Can a soul exist in a being from another dimension? The Church of the Eternal Fire teaches that all post-conjunction creatures are abominations, soulless monsters that must be destroyed. But many priests have never actually met a higher vampire or spoken with a Doppler. Their certainty is based on doctrine rather than experience, and witches who have that experience often find the doctrine lacking. In the end, the higher beings are proof that the conjunction did not merely bring monsters, but complexity. The world would be simpler if all vampires were mindless beasts, if all creatures from other dimensions could be killed without moral qualms. But simplicity is not the nature of this world. The conjunction shattered simple categories, mixing beings from countless worlds, creating situations where the monster is sometimes more human than the human, and where the hunter must question whether the hunt is just. We have explored the creatures and magic that populate the continent, but there is another layer to this world, the stories that the people themselves tell. In villages and cities, in castles and camps, folk share tales that have been passed down through generations, stories that often contain kernels of truth wrapped in layers of myth and exaggeration. These tales are more than entertainment. They are the cultural memory of a people, teaching lessons about survival, morality, and the nature of their strange world. One of the most important sources of these tales is a book called Fairy Tales and Stories, or Tales and Legends, written by a scholar named Florence Delanoy, who lived approximately 200 years after the events involving Geralt of Rivia. By that time, the Witcher and his companions had become legendary figures, their true history lost beneath layers of mythologizing and creative embellishment. Delanoy collected folk tales from across the continent, stories told by common folk about witches, sorceresses, and monsters. The book opens with a tale about a witcher who sought counsel from a soothsayer. "This counsel I shall give you. Don hobnailed boots and take an iron staff. Walk in your hobnailed boots to the end of the world. Tap the road in front of you with the staff, and let your tears fall. Go through fire and water. Do not stop. Do not look back. And when your boots are worn out, when your iron staff is worn down, when the wind and the sun have dried your eyes such that not a single tear will fall from them, then you will find what you are searching for, what you love, at the end of the world." Perhaps the Witcher in the story does not follow this advice. He walks through fire and water, yes, but he takes only his Witcher's sword. He does not heed the soothsayer's words, and this, the tale says, was good, because she was evil. This story encapsulates a truth about witches. They follow their own path, trust in their own skills, and reject the manipulations of those who would control them through prophecy or magic. It is a tale about agency and self-determination, values that witches hold dear. Another tale in the collection speaks of a witcher girl who is offered riches, power, influence, fame, and a long, happy life. She rejects all of these, saying, "I wish for a horse, as black and swift as a nightly gale. I wish for a sword, as bright and keen as a moonbeam. I wish to overstride the world on my black horse through the black night. I wish to smite the forces of evil and darkness with my luminous blade. This is a story about purpose, about choosing duty over comfort, about the witches calling to fight monsters regardless of personal cost. It is also perhaps a woman's tale, suggesting that even in a male-dominated profession, there were or could have been female witches, though history has obscured them. There is a darker tale about a witcher who encounters death herself, personified as a woman tending to flames. Each flame represents a life, burning bright or flickering weak. The witcher asks which flame is his, and death shows him a candle barely alive, struggling to stay lit, almost extinguished. The implication is clear. The witcher's life is precarious, constantly on the verge of ending. This reflects the reality of a witcher's existence, fighting monsters that could kill them at any moment, living on the edge between survival and death, never knowing which contract will be their last. Folk tales about sorceresses paint them as powerful, capricious, and dangerous. In one story, a sorceress offers a young person anything they desire, but the gift comes with a cost not immediately apparent. These tales serve as warnings. Do not trust magic. Do not make deals with mages. Do not believe that power comes without price. The common people of the continent have good reason to distrust sorceresses, who often involve themselves in politics and use their magic to manipulate events to their advantage, caring little for the collateral damage inflicted on ordinary folk. Then there are the monster tales, stories told to frighten children or to pass the time during long winter nights. These tales often contain practical advice disguised as entertainment. A story about a striga teaches that curses can be broken, but at great risk. A tale about a leshen warns that the forest must be respected. A legend about a water hag reminds listeners not to approach strange bodies of water without caution. These stories are survival guides, condensed into narrative form, so they will be remembered and passed on. Some tales are cautionary, speaking of what happens when humans become monsters themselves. The story of the Bloody Baron of Crow's Perch tells of a nobleman who descends into violence and cruelty, creating misery for everyone around him. The Rats, a gang of young outlaws, are remembered in stories that present them sometimes as heroes fighting injustice, other times as criminals who deserve their fates. These ambiguous tales reflect the moral complexity of the world, where heroes are flawed and villains sometimes have understandable motivations. There are also love stories, though they rarely end happily. The tale of Lara Doran and Cregennan is told as a tragedy, a warning about the dangers of crossing racial boundaries or defying destiny. The story of the Witcher and the sorceress Yennefer becomes, in folk retellings, a tale of love that transcends death, but is ultimately doomed by the very nature of what they are. These stories suggest that true love is possible in this harsh world, but that it is fragile, constantly threatened by the violence and chaos that surrounds it. Prophecies feature heavily in the folklore, though the common folk understand them even less than scholars do. Ithlin's prophecy about the end of the world and the child of elder blood is repeated in various forms, each telling changing details, until the original meaning is obscured. Some versions say the world will be saved by the child, others that the child will destroy it. This reflects the truth that prophecies are slippery things, interpreted differently by each person who hears them, shaped by the fears and hopes of the interpreter. There are also purely fantastical tales, stories that may have no basis in historical fact, but which capture truths about the human condition. Tales of heroes who slay dragons and win kingdoms, of peasants who outwit nobles through cleverness, of magical objects that grant wishes but always with unexpected consequences. These stories serve as allegories, teaching lessons about ambition, humility, caution, and courage. What is fascinating about these folk tales is that they exist within a world that already contains real monsters and magic. The people telling these stories have likely encountered drowners or seen a witcher pass through their village. They know magic exists because they have seen sorceresses work spells. And yet, they still tell tales that exaggerate, mythologize, and alter reality. This speaks to a fundamental human need, the need to make sense of a chaotic world through narrative, to find meaning in events, to create heroes and villains, even when reality is far messier. The stories also reveal how different communities view witches and magic. In some regions, witches are respected, seen as necessary protectors. In others, they are feared and despised, viewed as barely better than the monsters they hunt. Sorceresses might be portrayed as wise advisors or as manipulative schemers. Elves are sometimes depicted as tragic figures, other times as dangerous foreigners. These variations in storytelling reflect the diversity of the continent, the different experiences and prejudices of its many peoples. And in all these tales, there is the recurring theme of transformation. People become monsters through curses or choices. Monsters become people through understanding or magic. The Witcher, who is neither fully human nor fully monster, exists in the liminal space between, transformed by magic into something new. The continent itself was transformed by the conjunction. Nothing is permanent, nothing is fixed, and identity is always subject to change. This is perhaps the deepest truth hidden in the folklore, that in a world shaped by catastrophe and magic, change is the only constant, and what we are today may not be what we become tomorrow. We have journeyed together through the lore and folk tales of the continent, from the conjunction that reshaped reality to the prophecies that may determine its end, from the creation of witches to the monsters they hunt, from the elder races and their fading glory to the creatures that lurk in waters and forests. We have explored a world that is rich beyond measure, a world where every legend has roots in truth and every truth becomes legend. What we discover in this exploration is that the world of the Witcher is not simply a backdrop for adventure, but a living, breathing entity, shaped by history and magic, populated by beings both wonderful and terrible, governed by forces that resist simple understanding. It is a world that rewards curiosity and punishes arrogance, that offers no easy answers to difficult questions, that forces its inhabitants to make choices without certainty of the consequences. The folklore we have examined serves multiple purposes. It entertains, yes, but it also teaches, warns, and preserves. These stories are how knowledge survives across generations in a world where books are rare and literacy is limited. They are how communities make sense of trauma, how they cope with living in a land where monsters are real and death is always close. They are how heroes are created and lessons are learned. But perhaps most importantly, these tales remind us that we are not alone in the darkness. The Witcher walking a lonely road is part of a tradition stretching back centuries. The monster haunting the forest has counterparts in 100 other forests across the continent. The prophecy that terrifies us was foretold by someone who faced their own terrors. We are connected through these stories, through the shared experience of living in a world that is dangerous and beautiful and strange. The continent is a world that deserves to be explored. Its stories deserve to be told, and its legends deserve to be preserved. Every creature we have discussed tonight has its own tale, its own place in the grand tapestry of this world. From the smallest drowner to the mightiest dragon, from the humblest godling to the most powerful higher vampire, each exists for a reason. Each contributes to the whole. So as we conclude our journey for tonight, I invite you to carry these stories with you. Remember them when you face your own darkness, whatever form it takes. Remember that witches are made, not born, that monsters are often more complex than they appear, and that prophecies are glimpses of possibility rather than certainties. Remember that the elder races built wonders that humans have yet to match, that water and forest hold mysteries we do not fully understand, and that sometimes the line between monster and hero is thin indeed. If you have found value in this journey through the folklore and legends of the continent, I would be grateful if you would like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are so many more stories to explore, so many more corners of this world to examine, so many more legends waiting to be uncovered. Together, we will continue to delve into the lore of fantasy worlds, one tale at a time. Until next time, wanderers, may your path be safe, may your silver sword stay sharp, and may you always remember that in a world of monsters, the most important thing is not the blade you carry, but the choices you make. The stories continue, the legends endure, and the journey is far from over. Good night, and toss a coin to those who walk the dark roads, for they do it so others need not.